Dan Proft, thank you for joining us on this edition of Against the Current. We are pleased to have Colonel Allen West as our guest on this edition. Colonel Allen West, who needs no other introduction than Colonel Allen West, although it is worth pointing out what you're doing now that you left Congress, because some people may not know, in Dallas, heading up the National Center for Policy Analysis. And that's important work. And so just kind of the background that you've taken your kind of policy-driven agenda from Congress to a think tank and specifically your areas of focus.
Well, the thing is, being in the military, we're about solving problems. You don't go home until things are taken care of. It's all about accomplishing the mission. So that's what I look at, is that we need to have better policy and not worry about the politics that are out there. And that's really where we find ourselves in this 2016 election cycle. So when NCPA called me back in October 2014, they were a 33-year-old conservative free market think tank. They focused primarily in the past on health care. But if you're a national center, you've got to focus on national issues. So we're doing a lot more on taxes, entitlement spending, economic growth, energy, still, being very strong in healthcare, but also national security now.
And just on healthcare, since that's kind of your breadbasket, the news just recently about the premium spikes from Obamacare, everything that conservative free market types predicted would happen with this backdoor government takeover of healthcare is now happening. People are feeling it and seeing it. It still as unpopular as the day it was passed. Seems like this is a real opportunity for the next president, the next Congress, to unwind this if the composition of the executive branch and the legislative branch is right.
Well, it's a huge opportunity, and I think that this is something that the GOP-held House and Senate should have been working on as they go along. You could have been putting, legislation in front of President Obama and forcing him to veto it, because when you look at the Affordable Care Act, first of all, we know it's not affordable, and it's not really protecting all of the patients that are out there. A lot of people have lost their doctors. But it is really just a wealth redistribution scheme. 20 new taxes that are part of it: capital gains tax, dividends tax, medical device tax, the individual mandate that is a tax, is not a fine, the employer mandate, even a tanning tax. Dan, maybe you go to the tanning booth. I don't go to the tanning booth.
Well, no,
being up here in Chicago.
Yeah, right.
But I mean, that's how insidious the government has become. And so when you look at the fact that we knew this train wreck was coming, I really believe that it's intentional. Because Nancy Pelosi once said you have to pass the bill in order to find out what is in it. Now that we know what is in it, they're looking for anyone that they can blame. They're blaming Republicans, which is, crazy and unconscionable. But they're primarily going to blame the health insurance companies because they promised them something, the risk corridor, which said that the federal government would back up any losses that they had, which essentially is a bailout for the insurance companies. And since the insurance companies are not going to get that, United Healthcare, Humana, Aetna, you name it, Cigna, they're all saying, we're out of here. We're out of these exchanges.
Well, that's what's interesting about it, too. On the one hand, I hear Jonathan Gruber, that MIT dimwit Obamacare architect, tell me that the market is just taking form in the Obamacare universe. And so some health insurance companies are leaving that can't compete, and there'll be new entrants to market. We have this Schumpeterian creative gales of destruction going on. Well, if that's the case, then why is the Obama administration proposing a $190 million bailout of insurance companies?
Yeah, absolutely
$190 billion bailout of insurance companies.
You're absolutely right. And why would the federal government put themselves in the health insurance market in the first place? Much the same as they did with the mortgage industry back in 1978 with the Community Reinvestment Act. And we see how that ended up 30 years later.
So we had a caller to our show who said, he summed up Obamacare in one sentence. Probably the best summation I've heard, just from a regular guy. Said, so here's how I see Obamacare. My 84-year-old neighbor and her 18-year-old cat have the same doctor, and neither one of them needs the morning after pill.
There you go.
So,
and you got Ezekiel Emanuel here.
Zeke.
Yeah.
75 and done.
Absolutely.
Yeah, got to get out at 75.
Absolutely. And so I really think that they set this up so that it probably would collapse because they really want that single payer.
Well, I think that's probably true. So we know what Hillary wants if she's elected. What should Donald Trump and a Republican Congress do? I think this has to be one of the first, if not the first, items on their domestic agenda.
Sure.
So let's start from the premise that Trump is successful, Republicans maintain control of Congress. What's the Obamacare unwind legislation look like?
I think you have to start looking at the things that have worked, the pre-existing conditions. You know, one of the things we ought to look at is high-risk pools. The other thing we need to look at, if you want to keep your kid on your insurance to 26, that's fine. But you need to start peeling back these things like the individual mandate. You need to start peeling back the employer mandate so we can grow businesses again. We should not be penalizing businesses if they go above, 49 employees. Then we have to look at how we can expand health savings accounts for people to take care of their routine medical expenses and truly set up health insurance to be for those catastrophic things like this past March when I had to have a pacemaker implanted in because I found out in January I suffered from sick sinus syndrome. My heart rate was dropping down into the 20s. Everyone thought I was healthy and everything, but it was an issue of the sinus node not sending the message to my heart to beat. And so I was a high risk for cardiac arrest. So there are things that work for us that we need to have. We need to look at not so much the subsidies, but how do we provide tax credits for the working poor? What Obamacare really is a gross expansion of Medicaid. And when you talk about expanding Medicaid, that means that you still have people that are too far down into the poverty level. I think one of the best things to do is get Americans back to work so that they can buy their own health insurance. We can have small businesses that can pool together and be more competitive in the marketplace like larger corporations. And then we have to break down these little state-by-state mini monopolies we have with insurance commissions so we can really have competition in the system.
Yeah, but with respect to Medicaid, Bill Clinton's remedy for the crazy Obamacare system, as he termed it, is to push everybody into Medicaid or Medicare.
Yeah, well, those systems are going to collapse. And when you look at the budget of the United States of America, it's the mandatory spending side that is killing us. That's 64% of the budget, and that is Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, net interest of the debt. So if you're talking about pushing more people onto a government-backed system, which is on the taxpayers of the United States of America, you're pushing toward a collapse that is eventually going to come, just the same as this collapse of printing money in order to buy up our own debt. So between our economic policy, healthcare policy, monetary policy, we're doing all the wrong things. And that's what Donald Trump needs to be able to articulate.
Well, so Trump and a Republican Congress, it seems to me one of the things that's not being...
Well, let me correct you something. Not just a Republican
Well,
Congress.
this is where I'm going, I think.
Yeah, I think you and I
All
are
right,
saying
I'm going to get there first.
Yeah.
The Republican Congress, the composition of that Republican Congress and the disposition of that Republican Congress, it seems to me one of the things we're not talking about enough. Yeah, obviously everybody focuses on November 8th and victory, but then what do you do when you win, right? How do you translate this to a policy agenda? And Republicans don't have a great record at shrinking the size of government either, and Donald Trump gives me great pause for concern about his interest in shrinking the government. So the question is, are there enough backbenchers in the House and the Senate, enough Allen Wests still in the House and the Senate, the true ideological conservatives, to drive leadership in a direction they're not going to go by themselves?
I think that they are. And I think that you're going to see an incredible change in the composition of the House and Senate Republican leadership, regardless of who wins on November the 8th. I think that that's a critical thing. And I'll take you back when Bill Clinton gave his 1996 State of the Union speech when he said the era of big government is over. Look, he had Republicans that were conservative. And he was able to create a surplus. He was able to reduce the size and scope of government. He was able to have welfare reform. That's what we need to have. Because then when you came along with George W. Bush, you had a House and Senate under Republican control, and look what they did.
Medicare Part D.
They started expanding government, and we had a debt of about $4.6 trillion that ballooned up to $10 trillion. Of course, now it's on steroids. I mean, Barack has taken us from $10.67 trillion to what will be $20 trillion. So the most important thing is that if you're going to go to the American people and say, let us have control of the House and Senate, and we will do these things, you shouldn't be doing an omnibus spending bill.
Right.
You should be standing up and using the power of the purse in order to get the federal government under control. The fact that we have this bureaucratic administrative state that are coming up with these rules and regulations, 21,000 new rules and regulations in the past 7.5 years, that's crushing our business environment. It's very simple. Someone like me as the Speaker of the House, every single time you come up with a new rule and regulation, I find out how much it costs, that's how much I'm taking out of your budget, being it EPA, IRS, or whomever, because that's what we're going to get you to understand. Revenue generating measures come from the House of Representatives. It does not come from the executive branch.
So you think, but you mentioned this, kind of in passing, there's going to be a change in leadership in the House
I
and Senate.
do. I
You don't
really
think it's
do.
going to be Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell?
I think there are going to be challenges to that. And as a matter of fact, one of the things that you already see happening is they're trying to push the change of a rule on the motion to vacate, so that rank and file members of the House cannot, challenge the Speaker and get him to step down. So that's an indicator that the establishment of the Republican Party realized that, they may not be in that same position come January of next year.
If Trump, which scenario, I guess I should say, is the most likely to lead to the deposing of a Paul Ryan or Mitch McConnell? Trump winning or Trump losing?
Well, I think either way, but I think if it's a Hillary Clinton victory, that really makes it even more prominent, because folks are going to look and say, Mitch McConnell, where have you been? Have not heard from you. Paul Ryan, what did you do? You really did not help. And so the American people are going to be pretty upset about that.
When you look at Trump and Hillary and think about this last year and a half, starting from Trump descending down the escalator at the tower to everything that's transpired since that point in time, what do you think this election cycle says about where America is at and where she is going?
That's the critical thing. I think that it has said that we have forgotten what it means to live in a constitutional republic. We have fundamentally been transformed. We didn't realize it, although people are waking up to that. I know Donald Trump personally because 3 of his properties were in the district I represent in South Florida. He's not a conservative. He's not a liberal. He's not a progressive social. He's a populist. And he has gone out there and said the things that people are saying in their living rooms and speaking how they feel.
But not necessarily their locker rooms.
Not necessarily locker rooms. And I think that Donald Trump is really giving rise to this revolt against the political, the media, the academic, the cultural, the entertainment elites of this country, because folks are concerned. And they want someone that will go into Washington, D.C. and truthfully shake the thing up.
In your interactions with him, since you know him personally, did you ever have any conversations with him that would lead you to believe that this was all purposeful? Or did he kind of just intuitively figure that immigration, for example, illegal immigration, this is a big problem, and the Republican parties are sissies about it. And so I'm going to, this is going to be my foray in, and then we'll just see what happens. Or is this something that he actually developed? Do you think this was all well conceived?
I think Donald Trump was and this is the saying we have down south, the dog that caught the proverbial car.
Yeah.
And then he had to figure out, what do I do with this car? It was a novel idea. Maybe I can get out there and say a few things and, raise my profile. And then all of a sudden, oops, people start paying attention to me. People start latching on. And you've seen some different iterations of him, in change of leadership in his campaign, because I got to get serious about this thing. And I need to try to surround myself with people that are a little bit more serious about it.
I mean, doesn't that kind of Chauncey Gardner being there scenario that you're suggesting is how it came to be? Doesn't that kind of leave you tossing and turning at night?
Well, the thing is, what I would say is, if you're successful on November the 8th, I'm going to look and see, really and truthfully, who do you surround yourself with?
Yeah.
When I think about Hillary Clinton, I mean, she will surround herself with people that had to ask for immunity because they were under criminal allegations. That's not who we want to be in the cabinet of a presidential administration. But if Donald Trump can get out there and really get the folks that understand foreign policy, understand economic policy, understand national security policy, and will listen to them, I think that you will see an incredible shift in this country.
And what's your assessment of some of the people that he has surrounded himself with in the different policy areas in the campaign? I mean, he's foreign policy gentlemen like Waleed Ferris. These are serious, responsible, respected people. Obviously, friends of our show, Steve Moore and Art Laffer on the economic.
Yep.
So, I mean, he has put together some people that will, help Eliza Doolittle grow into a nice young woman.
He just announced, K.T. McFarland to be one.
K.T. McFarland.
Absolutely. Right. So I see that he is listening to the right folks. His Supreme Court justice picks, that was pretty impressive.
Yeah.
So it has to be more than window dressing. And when you do select these people and you make them part of your team, you need to be able to listen to them and take their counsel. And I think what has gotten us to this point in the United States of America, because we've had someone like Barack Obama who's an intransigent ideologue. No one would have said, hey, I think it's a really great idea. Just withdraw all your troops out of Iraq and everything will be hunky-dory. And look what has happened. I mean, the Middle East is in a complete, it's a morass. To sit down and give, Vladimir Putin a little yellow toy box with a red button on top called a reset button. And look what has happened in Eastern Europe with Ukraine and their intrusion into the Middle East. So I think that you have to have people that are going to tell you sometimes the things that you may not want to hear, but you need to hear.
On the domestic side, suggested maybe Obamacare is the first order of business. On the national security side is repealing effectively the Iranian nuclear deal.
There is no agreement. We need to understand there is no Iranian nuclear agreement.
Announcing there is no Iranian nuclear agreement.
Yeah, just say, hey, look, we're going to reinstate the sanctions. This was a complete folly, a complete screw up, much the same as the 1938 Munich Accords with Neville Chamberlain waving a piece of paper. Barack Obama pressured the Senate Democrats to filibuster it, so it never even made it to the floor. The Iranians have not done anything. As a matter of fact, all they've done is violate every single instance of it. So there is no agreement.
And cash out.
And cash out. I mean, $1.7 billion of laundered cash we've given these guys, not to mention all the other billions of dollars that we released. And we're trying to help European banks open up avenues for them to go down and invest in. This is the #1 sponsor of Islamic terrorism in the world. They are controlling 4 major capitals in the Middle East. Hezbollah, Hamas, the Quds Force, all of this. And Russia is becoming their ally. And if we're not careful, between Vladimir Putin and Russia, Hassan Rouhani and Iran, I believe 55, maybe up to 65% of the oil and gas resources in the world will be controlled by those 2 countries. And we can't allow that to happen.
Well, just going back to American culture, because this pervades everything. It pervades the kind of decision making that we do across the spectrum of issues. Is American culture where we find ourselves today? Do you think it's salvageable?
I do, but and the reason why I say I do is because everyone knows that the NFL ratings are down.
Yeah.
But people don't want to talk about the real reason why they're down. The real reason why they're down is because Roger Goodell made a decision. Roger Goodell told the Dallas Cowboys, you cannot put a decal on your helmet to remember the 5 Dallas police officers that were killed. But it's okay for Colin Kaepernick and all of his antics and all these other high-paid multi-million-dollar athletes to do the disrespect to our national anthem and our flag. The American people don't want to play that. So I think that there is that silent majority in the culture, but we've got to export it out. We've got to get it onto our university campuses. I tell people the most important elected position in the United States of America is school board. That's where we have to start. That's where you start making a change in the culture, is educating our future generations.
So Donald Trump made an interesting choice a couple of weeks outside of the election, going to North Carolina, swing state. It's in Charlotte. A lot of constituencies he could pick in North Carolina to focus on and to make a direct appeal to. The constituency he picked were black families. Proposed a quote-unquote New Deal with black families, talked about educational opportunity, public safety, access to good jobs. I thought that was really interesting because, it's one thing, a lot of Republicans will make the perfunctory appeal to black families.
Outreach.
Minority families.
Yeah.
They'll do it around Labor Day. Then we'll remember that it's going to go 90-10 Democrat to Republican.
And then they never see you again.
So how did you view that overture that Donald Trump made and the timing of that overture? It seemed to me that he deserves a little credit for it, even if that's not the audience, even if the audience is kind of the gooey suburban independents. The fact that he is willing to continue to address or to raise that issue and to essentially ask people again, what do you have to lose? I thought it was kind of an important moment.
No, it was a very important moment, and I think that the Republicans have forgotten their relationship with the black community. The Republican Party was established in 1854 for one reason: end slavery. 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, Republicans. The first members of the House and Senate that were black were not Democrats. They were Republicans. Prior to me, the last black Republican from the state of Florida was Josiah T. Walls, 1873 to 1876.
Wow.
The party of the Klan, the party of Jim Crow, the party of segregation, poll test, literacy test, poll taxes was the Democrat Party. Dwight David Eisenhower federalized the National Guard to back up Brown versus the Board of Education. Everett Dirksen, the Senate Republican, was the one that helped the civil rights legislation to pass. Not Robert Byrd and not Al Gore Sr. It was Lyndon Baines Johnson who came up with the brilliant idea of his Great Society programs and the War on Poverty to give checks to women who have children out of wedlock. and the government will continue to give them checks, except for one caveat. They can't have a man in the home. So the time that I was born in 1961 in the inner city of Atlanta, Georgia, the same neighborhood that gave us Dr. King, you did not see black kids that did not have mothers and fathers in the home. Because back then, 75 to 77% of black families were two-parent households. Today it's 24%. When you think about education opportunities, when you think about small business entrepreneurship and economic growth in the inner cities, it's not happening. And who has been controlling the inner cities and the urban areas all this time? Look at Chicago, right here where you all are. Okay, it is about time that a Republican presidential candidate went into the community and said exactly what he said. What do you have to lose? And I give him all the credit for that. Because number one, it was courageous. Number two, it was principally absolutely spot on correct. And you know what has happened? A lot of people in the black community, now they're thinking about it. They may not come out and vote for him, but they certainly are not going to vote for her. And when President Obama went in front of the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation and said that he would be personally insulted if Hillary Clinton did, that peeved people like you will not imagine. There were some things said in some back channel email exchanges because basically he was saying, I don't care about what is happening in your community. This is all about me. And you better vote for Missy White Lady here or else. And I'm telling you, I do not think you will see a large black turnout. I know everyone's talking about Trump's only going to get 3% or 2%. I think he may get 8 or 9%.
Okay. And so is that something to build on? I mean, the Republicans
Absolutely.
Facing a demographic challenge.
Absolutely, it's something to build on because, my parents, Dan, were registered Democrats. My parents voted for John Lewis. That was our member of Congress. Mm-hmm. But my parents were very conservative in nature. My parents believed in faith. They believed in family. They believed in education, individual responsibility. And coming from a father who served in World War II and an older brother who served in Vietnam, we believed in service to this nation. Those are conservative principles. Now, the thing that I hate, and I've told Reince Priebus this before, I hate the word outreach. Outreach means you show up in Black History Month, you have fried chicken, cornbread, collard greens, you sway off balance trying to sing Negro spirituals, and they never see you again until 60 days before the election. This is about policy inclusiveness. You need to tell the black community, we are the party that has always stood with you. Come back home.
Yeah, I wish I would have been there when you told Reince Priebus that. And you think people are receptive because they've been hurt enough, or because the thing
they see, and they
know. The concern I have though is exactly what you started out: the Great Society and the soul crushing nature of the welfare state. Mm-hmm. And the left knows the easiest way to convert somebody to be a Democrat is make them dependent.
And that's what Johnson said.
Right.
If you remember that little quip he made on Air Force One, that if we get them to vote for this, we'll have them for the next 200 years. And we're 50 years down the road.
Right. And the numbers bear out that he was right.
He was absolutely right.
So how do you wean somebody off that? It's almost like a 12-step program, but how do you wean somebody off, or hundreds of thousands of families off of that dependency and onto a different track?
You've got to talk to their self-esteem. You got to talk to them about one single thing. You are not free by sitting around and being economically enslaved to someone, because that's what it is. And the left can't challenge that. And look, let's be very honest. That's why I was the #1 target for the Democrat Party in 2012. A kid born up in the inner city of Atlanta, Georgia, been married 26 years, has a wife with an MBA and a PhD, 2 great daughters, 2 master's degrees, successful military career. Nah, we can't have that kind of thing running around.
It's Rusty Reno and First Things had a piece about this earlier this cycle that I've referenced a lot because I think it's the best distillation of what the left does that I've read since I read Bob Creamer's book, actually. And it's this: solidarity and marginality. Mm-hmm. Right? That's the whole left. You're a marginalized population, even if you're not. If we characterize you as one, and everybody treats you as one, and we can say you're being victimized, then we own you, and we own people that aren't a part of your group. Yep. But say, hey, well, they're being treated unfairly, so I'm voting for the Democrat. Yeah, that's the whole game.
It's all about victimization.
Yeah,
and it's a simple choice.
Bigot baiting.
Do you want to be a victor, or do you want to be a victim? And when you talk about the culture, I think one of the incredible cultural things that happened in the United States of America was the participation trophy. because now we have taken that from the Little League fields and we have made it into a policy agenda where we are giving people something for doing nothing, all because we want them to believe that we're helping their self-esteem when you're not. You're ruining it.
So where does it come from? If people are walking away from the church and the church is walking away from the church in so many respects, I mean, certainly the Catholic Church is, with kind of the being
Watered down.
beset from within by social justice Catholics, then where do people go for truth? It's not coming from the government. It's not coming from politicians. And if you don't know the source of truth, then how can you live it?
Well, I think it's very important that the church does reestablish and reassert itself. When you look at 2012, when I believe it was close to 30 million evangelical Christians didn't even vote,
Right.
7 million were registered. That's something that you see a lot of ministers realizing that they're not going to be afraid of the Johnson Amendment anymore. They're going to speak up. Maybe they won't stand up and say, go vote for this person, but they're going to start talking about policies and principles. In Houston, 5 pastors were ordered by the mayor, Annalise Parker, to turn over their sermons.
Yeah.
In Atlanta, Georgia right now, you have a pastor that has lost his job at the Georgia Department of Health because someone sent a video of a sermon that he gave. Now, if that can't rally your leaders in the Christian church to get them to understand separation of church and power, church and state, has nothing to do with you not having a faith. It had everything to do with the state and the head of church not being one and the same and persecuting people for their religious beliefs. That's where we are right now.
Well, that's it. And so you have the state doing what the state always wants to do, is come between people and their faith, because they want the state to be
supreme power.
Yeah, they want the state to be your high priest and priestess, and Hillary Clinton specifically said as much, as Barack Obama did previously, right? What Barack Obama's definition of sin, something that doesn't comport with my values.
That's right.
My values. He's God.
Yeah.
And so, so that's the thing. If religious liberty is under attack by the government, but those who are faith oriented shrug their shoulders, then are we done?
No, I think that it has to be personal. All of a sudden, when you are having black pastors where the knock is coming on their door, then I think you will see a cultural change. Because it's so easy for folks to sit back and say, yeah, Dan Allen, you're talking about that stuff. It's never going to happen to me.
Right.
Well, all of a sudden, when it's happening to, not white pastors in Houston and in Atlanta, then you're starting to get folks' attention.
But we cede so much territory. I mean, I'm not trying to get you to be fatalistic like me, but we cede so much territory, and then you wake up and there's not enough territory to be gained back.
Well, see, this is the thing. Being a military guy, I think about some great stands that people have made in our military. I think about Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain on the second day of Gettysburg, when he was standing there at Little Round Top, ran out of ammunition, casualties mounting, the Confederates still coming up Little Round Top, hero of the bayonet charge, saved the day. I think about the 101st, surrounded at Bastogne in December 1944, and the Germans sent them a note asking them to surrender, and General McAuliffe sent back a note saying nuts. I think about, the Marines that were surrounded Chosin Reservoir, and when they were asked if they were going to surrender, the Marine general said, nope, we got the bastards right where we want them. We can attack in every direction. That's who we are. And sometimes when it seems that you're at that most dark moment, that's the moment when the light is about to come forth.
All right. Well, on that optimistic note, we'll close it there, so we have hope for sunshine tomorrow.
And you know what I like about your title? Thomas Jefferson said, in matters of style, swim with the current, but in matters of principle, stand like a rock.
Against the Current. And this is been another edition of Against the Current Upstream Ideas. Our guest, Colonel Alan West, President, CEO of the National Center for Policy Analysis in Dallas now. Colonel West, thanks so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Great.